This chart shows one of the most worrying global trends. It shows how the world became much more democratic, but then in the past 20 years, the amount of liberal democracies has dropped a bunch. How did this happen? Wasn't liberal democracy supposed to be the end of history? You know, the US won the Cold War, the West had triumphed. But now around the world, we have rising dictators, packed courts, failed elections, growing paramilitaries, and all these things in the US as well. It's not very good. So today we're going to solve the puzzle for why democracy is dying. And fundamentally, democracy is dying because populism is eating its own host. So there are three pieces to this puzzle. One, we're going to look at the data around the rise of authoritarianism. Two, we're going to try to understand why it's happening. And then three, we're going to take a step back and look at why liberal democracies aren't the end of history and what might happen next. And if you're new here, hello, my name is Reese. We're doing a series together on the juiciest questions, how everything evolved and what's happening today. And so I've done a decade of research on this stuff, including reading Eric Hobsbawm's 4-part history series on the modern day. And I've made 20,000 note cards from all this stuff, all as a way to try to answer these questions together. Let's do it. Okay, so the first piece of this puzzle is to look at the data on how democracy's dying and authoritarianism is on the rise. And so we can start with this chart, it's a cool chart. Overall, I think this chart makes me optimistic, which is that around the year 1789, there were no liberal democracies in the world. Everything was a closed autocracy. We had monarchies, we had all this stuff, and then we got the United States, and we got the French Revolution, and we got these things, and we started to have parliamentary systems, and we started to get rights, and we started to remove slavery, and we started to kind of be better, you know? Here's another graph that shows the amazing rise of democracies in the world. There are these three waves of democracy. The aftermath of World War I, where we got some more democracies, when the empires went away. And then there was decolonization, where we got a lot more democracies. And then finally, the fall of communism, which led to a lot more democracies. But yeah, unfortunately, we do have some democratic backsliding today. So what this graph shows are, not very many regimes are democratizing anymore, and lots of them are autocratizing. In other words, they are becoming more autocratic. They're becoming more authoritarian. Here's a great little picture of some of the squad that we love, who's doing this autocracy stuff. We got Putin, we got Trump, we got Xi, we got Maduro, we got Orban, maybe, from Hungary. And so there's this awesome recent report that I want to share with you on the decline of democracy recently. And so they have a bunch of these really good quotes in it. This is in like their executive summary. And they say, okay, democracy in the world, 2024. The level of democracy for the average world citizen is back to 1985. By country averages is back to 1996. That's not good. That means we're kind of back to where democracy was before the fall of the USSR. Democracy is losing out the most in terms of economic power. It's at its lowest level in over 50 years. It's truly a global wave of autocratization. Eastern Europe and South and Central Asia are in particularly steep decline. So yeah, this does not paint a great picture. Here's a graph that shows a bunch of these countries that are becoming more autocratic. So it's Mexico, it's Hungary, it's India, it's Serbia, it's Nicaragua, it's Greece, it's Peru. Here's a bunch that are called bell-turn autocratizers, which are ones that were getting better. This is like Indonesia or whatever. It's like, oh, maybe it's going to be better. Or Myanmar. And it was like, no, it's bad. But there is a little bit of hope. These are U-turn democratizers where they were getting worse. This is Poland and Brazil and Tunisia or whatever. And now they're kind of moving back up. You know, there was so much hope with the Arab Spring, the early 2010s. It was like, oh man, maybe there's going to be all these democracies there. But I've heard this called the Arab Winter, where this graph shows in all these different places how much has their democracy index changed, and only essentially in Tunisia has it gone up. And here's another graph that shows that, which is like, yeah, Tunisia, not a bad democracy, but the rest of the Middle East is mostly still authoritarian. And I saw this myself in Egypt, which had, you know, Tahrir Square and the Arab Spring, and it was exciting. And then the Muslim Brotherhood came in, they kind of ruined everything. And so then you got the military that kind of said no more of that. And so now they're just kind of a military state again. But maybe the saddest one, though, is what's called the coup belt. And so this is the Sahel region in Africa. And this is maybe one of the saddest legends of any graph, which is the number of coups since 2020. So in the last 5 years, the red ones have had one coup, while the dark color have had 2 coups. And so yeah, all these ex-French African colonies are having a lot of coups. But now let's zoom into America, my home nation. What's up? I support whoever's in the presidency at any given time, of course. Yes, sir. No, yep. Bend the knee, of course, definitely. And you can see from 1900 through now, things got better. We allowed women to vote. We got the civil rights movement. It was all good. But then you can see more recently, this was Trump's first term in office, where it kind of went down a good amount. Or you can zoom in here to see USA versus the regional average, like us plus Western Europe and Canada. And this dark line shows that things have generally gotten better for everybody over the last 50 years, and they've gone down a bit. But then for the United States, this is when they dropped a bunch during the first Trump term. And this doesn't even include this current term yet with ICE and paramilitaries and whatever. Okay, so now that we've seen how authoritarianism is on the rise, we can ask ourselves why. Why is this happening? This is the second piece of the puzzle to understand what the hell's going on. And so I like to think of this as the supply and demand of autocracy. And so the demand for this happens when people are more scared, when people are more polarized, when people want rule of order, a strong state, a strong man to get behind. And then the supply of autocracy happens when you have kind of charismatic demagogues that really want to get more and more power. And so you can see a graph here that shows the demand for authoritarianism is kind of high. In high income countries, it's 20 or 30% of people say that rule by a strong leader or the military would be a good way of governing their country. But it's especially true in these middle income countries like India or Indonesia, where it's like 75, 90% of people are like, yeah, we should have a strong leader. Another thing that I want to show you to understand this is one of my favorite graphs of all time. And this is right before the fall of the USSR. And what it shows is the supply and demand for democracy. And so you can see here, this is in the early 80s. Here are all these countries that have a difference between supply and demand for democracy. So you can see up here on the right, here's all these countries in USSR like Slovakia and Romania and Bulgaria and Lithuania and the Czech Republic. All these countries where the people were changing their values. They were becoming more individualistic, more into freedom, but their government was still, a communist kind of authoritarian regime. And then you can see here on the left side is then the change in the level of democracy, where this is from the early 80s to the late 90s, how much democracy came around. And you can see for all these countries up here, former USSR places, they all got much more democratic. And why? Well, because they demanded so much more democracy, and so they got it. And obviously, this doesn't always happen. You can see in a place like China maybe demanded a little bit more democracy, but didn't get any. They got Tiananmen Square. Or you can see a place like Portugal, which didn't really want any more democracy, and they kind of wanted a lot less. They wanted more of a strong man, but they didn't get it. Mostly things stayed the same. Or a place like Venezuela, where the people were already kind of feeling scared and things, and things got a lot more autocratic there. That chart is taken from some of this data around what's called the World Values Survey, or this Inglehart-Weitzel World Cultural Map. And so this is in 2023, and you can see how it maps some of these like survival values around, if you're in Zimbabwe or whatever, it's like you mostly just care about getting your family fed versus some of these more self-expression values. While if you're in Sweden, people are more like, oh, I just want to be myself. Where these folks in the Islamic world and in Latin America, they want their traditional religious values, while folks in Japan or in these Confucian economies or the Protestant Europe, they're much more into some of these secular values like freedom of expression or whatever. And so what this shows is what people value. And so what this helps us understand is the demand for democracy or the demand for more authoritarian regimes. The other thing that can create more demand for autocracy or authoritarianism is polarization, right? That's kind of the theme of the series where we're looking at how tribalism or natural tribalism can lead to polarization. With a more polarized populace, then they demand more authoritarianism. Why? Well, because you start to see the other side as the other, and it kind of will do whatever it takes to make sure Biden's in office, to make sure Trump's in office. And so you become more authoritarian to make sure the other side doesn't get in there. And that's shown with this chart here that shows across Hungary and Nicaragua and Serbia how when you have political polarization, which are these dark lines here, that those rise up. And as those rise up, as government disinformation rises, as political parties have more hate speech, as all those things rise, then what falls is liberal democracy. It falls, it falls, it falls. And now though, let's look at the third piece of this puzzle and kind of zoom out and think about whether liberal democracy and this move towards liberal democracy is inevitable or whether something else is going to come and replace democracy. So you can see this classic line from our boy Winston Churchill, Sir Winston Churchill, that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others, which has been true. It's like, oh God, democracy sucks. It's not the best. It has all these issues. But like communism, it's like that didn't do that well either. And the political theorist Francis Fukuyama talks about democracy and the rise of democracy in his book, The End of History and the Last Man. And what he says, and this is in 1992, he says, what we may be witnessing is not just the end of the Cold War or the passing of a particular period of post-war history, but the end of history as such. That is, the end point of mankind's ideological evolution and the universalization of Western liberal democracy as the final form of human government. And poor Francis, he's been kind of raked across the coals for this take, because obviously these days it's like, oh no, we've done democratic backsliding. But I have a little bit more patience with Fukuyama, because remember, this piece was written when he was just a young guy in the early 90s, but after writing this, he wrote these other two amazing books, which I've loved on Kindle. I actually just ordered copies to my home. And they are The Origins of Political Order and then Political Order and Political Decay. And so these were written in the 2010s. And this was him trying to understand how political order forms more generally, and then also how it decays. And so this was kind of his first kind of rookie take. And then now that he's kind of matured, he knows that political order can actually decay. And then that kind of culminated in his final book here in the 2020, I think, called Liberalism and Its Discontents. And the key idea of that Fukuyama book is that we have this thing called liberal capitalist democracy. It's been great. There's this other book by Nayar called Liberal Capitalist Democracy, The God That Failed. And this set of three ideas has been so powerful over the last 200 years. And so liberalism has been this amazing ideology. It said, hey, let's have there be rights, and let's try to reframe everything around our social contract between us and the state and the rights that individuals have. And that ideology has led to an economic system of capitalism where we have free markets, which has been amazing. And it's also led to our political system of democracy, which has said, yeah, let's have free people, and people get to vote, and women get to vote, and black folks get to vote, and minorities get to vote. And it's obviously not perfect, but overall, we are seeing Martin Luther King's thing, which is that the arc of history is long, but it does bend towards justice. And so this set of ideology and economics and politics, this liberal capitalist democracy, it's gone so well over the last 200 years, and it's kind of controlled the world. But as both Fukuyama and Nayar say, it's kind of this God that failed. And so what we now have is vedocratic, financialized populism. And what that means is each of these little bits has kind of turned on its head. And so democracy's been good, but if you have too much democracy, it kind of turns into populism. And then capitalism's been good, but if you have kind of too much, it becomes this hyper-financialized world where companies and banks control everything. And then liberalism's been good, but if you have rights and freedoms as like the highest level thing, then you have all this NIMBYism, and you have a vedocratic system where you can't build anything anymore. And so people look at what we have here, this vedocratic financialized populism, and they're not that happy with it. And so that's when then they try and they say, okay, well, I guess we can move on then to this new illiberal, corrupt autocracy, where they say, okay, democracy didn't work. I guess we're just going to allow, autocracy to go to town. And when stuff becomes too populist, too autocratic, then it can start to eat the other parts of things. And so it starts to eat the capitalist part, and so we just get lots of corruption and Trump dinners and things like that. Or it eats the liberal part, where instead of having a right to trial for people, it's like, no, we become more illiberal and we just kick people out if we don't like them. So yeah, liberal capitalist democracy is in a very tricky place right now. And then one final thing I want to share with you is this great piece from Hank Green, where he talks about the internet as a machine that devours trust. And so what Hank is saying in this is that the internet does such a good job of allowing people to say things. And so what that means is we get some of these early cancelizations, like the Me Too movement, which was overall really good. It was like all the dudes were kind of sexually assaulting all the women. It's like, stop it. Don't do that. Do less of that. But then we started to just cancel everybody, So that was maybe not great. So that stopped us from like trusting each other, but it also devours trust because it stops us from trusting institutions. And so we think about democracy, we're like, oh, democracy's kind of cool. It's good, it's bad, but overall it's the best form of government except for all the rest. At least it's fine. But what the internet does is it allows people to say, oh no, democracy sucks. And part of that is true. That's like the Me Too version, where it's like, no, there's a lot of things that democracy should do better. But part of it's the more kind of RFK version, where he points at anything like big pharma, or the left points at things like big tech, and they point at institutions and they say, oh, we can't trust institutions either. Those need to be canceled. And so then as a species and as a society, we start to trust our institutions a lot less, which obviously then leads to more authoritarianism. So yeah, I hope this helps you understand the rise of authoritarianism. It's a little bit part of this series we're doing now on how our natural tribalism leads to polarization, leads to authoritarianism, and then can lead to genocide. But kind of the fact that we're even doing liberal democracy is kind of amazing, because remember, we're just these little chimps in clothes. And so we can't help but produce these us versus them tribal dynamics, and that can lead to things like authoritarianism. If you have any questions or feedback or thoughts, please put them in the comments down below. I will read your comments. If you want to check out those other videos on tribalism and polarization, they're here, or subscribe here if you're excited by that genocide video for some reason. Bye.